Well, hello and welcome to the next lesson. Today we'll talk about microbial antagonism and about antibiotics. So, let's go. First of all, what we need to know about biotope and biocynosis. The biotope is an area of uniform environmental conditions providing a living place for a specific biological community. So, in other words, we can say that biotope is specific place for specific population. Meanwhile, biocynosis is a specific population living in this very specific place. As an example, we can talk about such term as endemic. If we will talk about some animals or some plants, we can say that some animals are endemic for specific regions. For example, if we'll talk about Australia, we can say that koala bears or kangaroo are endemic for Australia. So it is an example of endemic. If we'll talk about some specific infections, we can say that for some specific area we have some specific infections. For example, in some regions of India we have endemic places for cholera, or in some specific places in Russia we have endemic area for tularemia and for plague. But the same infection will not be characteristic for another place. Another example, we can say that for some African or for some tropical countries, we have endemic malaria. So, endemic is some specific infection for some specific area, and it will be found there for a long period of time or even forever. Epidemic is some infection in some area for a limited period of time. So, an example of epidemic we had some time ago, and we have it even now. It started outbreak of coronavirus in China, but because people was not able to stop this epidemic on the level of one country, it spread it all around the world and it became pandemic. So pandemic means including the entire globe. So epidemic coronavirus became pandemic for now. Regarding flora, if we will talk about biology, flora is about vegetation, flora is about plants. But talking in microbiology, flora is about bacteria. Flora is about microorganisms. So in our body, we can have normal flora, which is also called saprophyte, and this normal flora can be found in different places. It can be found on surfaces, on the skin, in the mouth, in the nasal cavity, in the ears, and in gastrointestinal tract, and in our respiratory system. Meanwhile, the inner side of our body, which doesn't have any connection to the environment, is expected to be sterile. That means is required to be free of any kind of flora. On the second place, we can have conditionally pathogenic flora or conditionally pathogenic bacteria, which normally can be also found in our body. But it will never produce any infection until the immunity will slow down, or until these bacteria will get in places it is not supposed to be. For example, almost everyone has in its oral cavity Streptococcus. It's a conditionally pathogenic bacteria, Streptococcus pyogenes. And usually this bacteria is just living in the mouth of every person. But from the moment the immunity slows down, the person gets cold or something like that, and this bacteria can produce tonsillitis. So it will produce inflammation of tonsils, inflammation of throat, which will lead to problems on swallowing. It will produce inflammation, fever, headache, general intoxication, and so on. So it is an example of conditionally pathogenic flora. Also, about 15% of population of adult population in the world has Staphylococcus aureus in the nasal cavity, in nasopharynx, which is also considered to be conditionally pathogenic flora. So whenever the immunity slows down, it can produce some health issues like nasopharyngitis, like sinusitis, and so on. And also it can be a result of different nosocomial infections, different surgical site infections, because of some misusing of mask. If the mask of surgeon doesn't cover the entire face, but the nose is opened, so in this way some surgeons can contaminate the surgical wound with Staphylococcus, which will lead to surgical site infections. And also we have pathogens. Pathogens are that kind of bacteria which will produce an infection in any case, and it is not supposed to be found in the human body. Well, also our intestinal tract has its flora, which is not just not harmful for our body, but also it is very helpful. It is very useful for our health. For example, without any flora in the gastrointestinal tract, we could have a lot of intestinal infections, because one of the functions of the normal flora is antagonistic function. So it takes all the space, it takes all the resources of the gastrointestinal tract, and as well as it doesn't produce any harm to the body, it doesn't allow the pathogenic flora to grow in the body. As well, this flora is able to process some sugars as cellulose, which cannot be processed by our digestive tract by itself. And also some of bacteria are able to produce some vitamins which are helpful for our digestive tract and for our health. So normal flora is strictly required and strictly needed in our body. What is microbial antagonism? Well, antagonism means fighting. Whenever we have some different populations which are expecting to take some area and to use it for its own needs, we can have antagonism, we can have fighting. And it doesn't happen just in a macro world, it doesn't happen just among animals and among humans. This fighting also happens among bacteria. Whenever we have fighting between bacteria, the mostly accommodated, the mostly strong one will win in this fighting. So which kind of antagonism can happen between bacteria? First of all, the mostly simple one is as faster you will grow, as faster you will consume all the nutrients in the environment, as faster you will multiply, and as faster you will take all the space. So the mostly simple way to win in this kind of antagonism is to take the place first, to take the foods first. In this way, another kind of bacteria will not be able to take your place and will be in minority, so it will not be able to multiply that fast and it will be reduced and killed. it is a kind of it is a kind of passive antagonism, but also we can have active antagonism. Well, some of bacteria are able to produce some substances which will kill another bacteria. Such substances can be called or antibiotics or bacteriocins. So these substances will reduce the population of the bacteria which is in competition with this bacteria. Talking about antibiotics. What is antibiotic? Antibiotic is a substance which is able to destroy the bacteria. So whenever we are talking about bacterial infection and specific treatment, etiological treatment of bacterial infection, we will talk strictly about antibiotics. This is what we need to keep in mind, that every kind of microorganism which is able to produce an infection is treated with its own kind of drug. So for bacteria, it is antibiotic. Classification of antibiotics can be according to the result they can produce in the body, the result they can produce to this bacteria. So it can be bactericidal and bacteriostatic. Whenever we are talking about bactericidal action, cidal means killing, so bactericidal antibiotics are killing the bacteria. Meanwhile, bacteriostatic antibiotic just doesn't allow bacteria to multiply. Why do we need both of these types of antibiotics? First one, bactericidal, is needed whenever we need to escape as faster as possible of all the antibiotics. But it can have high danger. As well as all of pathogenic or conditionally pathogenic bacteria are able to produce some toxins, which are divided in two types, endotoxins and exotoxins. So these two types of toxins are meaning that the meaning of these two types of toxins, endotoxin, exotoxin, is a toxin which is released during the bacterial metabolism. Well, exotoxin is a result of bacterial metabolism during its life. Endotoxin is actually a particle of bacteria. So any kind of particle of bacteria which appears after bacteria dies and is decomposed can be potentially toxic for human body. So whenever we are using bactericidal antibiotics for bacteria which is able to produce endotoxins, we are putting the organism under the danger. So in that moment we apply bactericidal antibiotic for bacteria producing endotoxin. At the same time, all the bacteria will be destroyed, and we will release a big amount of endotoxin, which can lead to huge intoxication. It will be bacterial toxic shock, so it can lead to complications and even to death. So usually the majority of antibiotics we are using are bacteriostatic. Bacteriostatic antibiotics are just stopping the multiplication of bacteria. So every microorganism, every organism has its limit for its life. Whenever we are stopping the multiplication of bacteria, all of them will die, but one by one. So in this case, we will not release the endotoxin in that critical amount which can produce that toxic shock. Also, antibiotics can be biological, synthetic, and mixed. Biological antibiotics are antibiotics produced by other bacteria or other microorganisms as fungi. But synthetic are pure chemical substances which have possibility to destroy bacteria. And mixed is whenever we are taking biological antibiotics and combining them with synthetic antibiotic drugs. which can be side effects. Of antibiotics. The first kind of side effect is general. These side effects can be found also in other drugs. So these general side effects are well known. It's personal sensitivity, it's headache, it is allergic reaction, and so on. But whenever we are talking about specific side effects, it will be regarding the mechanism of action of these antibiotics. So first of all, especially if the antibiotic is administered orally, it has ability to destroy gastrointestinal flora. It has ability to destroy normal flora of our gastrointestinal tract. Well, the first symptom of this lack of normal flora will be diarrhea. And also it can produce other digestive problems like stomach problem, nausea, and vomiting. So this is the main list of side effects produced by antibiotics. Whenever we are destroying our normal flora of gastrointestinal tract with antibiotic treatment, it is required to make such kind of rehab of gastrointestinal flora by using of probiotics and prebiotics. Well, probiotics are special drugs containing bacteria with normal flora for our gastrointestinal tract, and prebiotics are that substances which are able to restore our gastrointestinal flora, which means these substances are actually foods for normal flora. So they will help these bacteria to grow and to multiply in our gastrointestinal tract. Microbial resistance to antibiotics. We can have two types of microbial resistance. First one is natural, and second one is acquired resistance. Natural resistance means some of antibiotics from their nature are not able to destroy some bacteria. So some bacteria from their nature have no any susceptibility for some antibiotics. But the mostly important one is acquired antibiotic resistance. The first one is multi-drug resistance. It is the mostly light type of multi-drug resistance. Whenever we are talking about MDR, that means we have at least one antibiotic to which these bacteria developed this resistance. So at least one group of antibiotics will not work anymore with this bacteria, and the rest of them will be active, will be efficient. Whenever we are talking about extensively drug resistance, it is the next step, next level of antibiotic resistance, which means almost all of bacteria acquired its resistance for the antibiotic, but some of them still have sensitivity and will be efficient for this infection, for this bacteria. And pan-drug resistance, it's a universal antimicrobial resistance. That means these bacteria became non-susceptible to all existing, for this moment, antimicrobial drugs. Also, pan-drug resistant bacteria is called superbacteria or superbug. So which is the solution for this last type of resistance? Actually, there is almost no solution because all kinds of antibiotics are useless in this case. Fortunately, we don't have too much cases of this, and usually all of these types of resistance will mean that we had a lot of mistakes in treatment. So if the first one can be kind of accidental treatment or accidental acquired resistance, whenever we are talking about extensively drug resistance or pan-drug resistance, it will mean that this bacteria was treated in the wrong way, this infection was treated in the wrong way for a lot of times until it became pan-drug resistant. First time it can be an accident, second and third time it can be just system. So the good news for pan-drug resistance, first of all, it doesn't happen too often, and the second one is that we can transform PDR in XDR. What does it mean? Every day we are producing different types of drugs. The pharmaceutical industry is working daily and producing daily different new types of antibacterial drugs. So actually, if we will have that luck that will give us one more antibiotic which will be efficient for this PDR bacteria, this bacteria will become XDR, and from this moment we have opportunity to treat it. And the last part of this lecture is regarding bacteriocins. What is bacteriocin? Bacteriocin is a kind of protein which can be produced by some species of bacteria, and these proteins will be toxic and will have bactericidal effect on other bacteria of other strains of the same species. So it will be bactericidal on other strains of different other strains of the same species or different species from this genus. So can we say that bacteriocins are antibiotics or not? Actually not. We cannot say it because bacteriocins, in comparison with antibiotics, they have very narrow spectrum of action, very narrow target group. So in some cases we can use bacteriocins as a treatment of some kinds of infections, but the problem will be that they will be very, very specific in their target group. So that's all for today. Thank you for your attention and see you next time. Bye bye.